This video is a review for transitions, modifiers, and parallelism. The first strategy we used was to come up with a list of common transitions and to break them into three categories. Continuers, these transitions join two ideas or sentences that are about the same topic and the same thing. Contradictors, which join two opposing ideas or sentences, or show how two are different. And cause and effect, which show a cause and effect relationship between two sentences or ideas. Specifically, I suggested looking through these lists to figure out words that you might be not so familiar with and pairing them with a more familiar word. Think about a word like moreover and replace the word also there and see if it sounds right. The starred ones are reportedly the most common on the actual PSAT. Transitions like in addition or for example or for instance. Comparisons like likewise or a sequence of events like subsequently. And subsequently means afterward or after a particular thing has happened. Think about contradictors such as nevertheless or nonetheless and compare them to words like but or however. And especially be aware of however and nevertheless as they are commonly used. Think of a word like whereas as a contradictor. Students often don't know what hence means. Think of it like therefore or because or consequently. Notice accordingly is also a common cause and effect word. Sometimes it can be helpful, given multiple choice questions, to consider the categories of the different transitions. Here we have two sentences, the first one about bananas being domesticated in a particular place, and the second sentence shows how they are cultivated throughout the world. So they're definitely different from each other. Turns out B, however, the only contradictor, is the correct answer. Number 2, blank it experienced an increasing number of territorial losses as it declined. The Roman Empire remained the most powerful economic, cultural, and military force in Europe until its collapse in the 5th century AD. Probably not a cause and effect relationship, since losing territory doesn't make you powerful. So we're looking for a contradictor. The best one here is A, although. By category, we could have gotten a 50-50 out of this. Sometimes when we have multiple transitions from the same category, they can almost be synonyms of each other. And if more than one answer would fit, assuming it was correct, that's probably not it. D, in fact, is the only continuer here that emphasizes how the second sentence proves the first. Number 4 is about author Louise Erdrich and who educated her. And the next one, or next part, is about how she identifies most strongly with the native part of her ancestry. So cause and effect is the best choice. And notice that all three of these other ones are all the same category, contradictor. Not always, but sometimes you can use that as a clue to help rule things out. Of course, sometimes it's the opposite is true, so make sure you read and pay attention. 5, we're talking about production of vegetables and fresh fruit production. Moreover is the only continuer here. Number 6 is explaining the cause and effect of albino animals' skin that is insufficiently dark to absorb sunlight during harsh winters and why they have difficulty thriving in the wild. A was the right choice. Notice B, C, and D are all contradictors. 7, the best choice here was indeed. It's the only continuer. We have 3 contradictors. For 8, if you read it, you can rule out cause and effect. And then we're down to despite or while. C makes a lot more sense. Number 9, the soil was deficient in nutrients. As a result, the Mayans suffered. We're looking for a cause and effect. That's the only one in that category. Number 10 is for, which is a cause and effect word. So think about for as in therefore. And if you use it like therefore, you'll be using it correctly. Number 1, we're talking about equality in academic opportunities and coeducational balance, definitely a continuer, which allows us to rule out D. And looking through the different choices, in fact was probably the best one. Number 12, the difference in planning a trip for relaxation purposes versus planning it to confer with executives. We're looking for a contradictor, which rules out A and D. And reading these two, it turns out C is probably the best choice. 13, we're talking about secular voices arguing that the Christian nation is a misnomer versus America founded as a Christian nation. So we're looking for a contradictor, which D is the only one here. For 14, the second sentence emphasizes the price of victory and just how big it is. If you think about moreover, think about also, and that one doesn't really fit. Indeed is the best choice. 15 talks about some details of Emily Dickinson, and then fortunately that her family helped her out, and that's why C is the best choice. 16, we want a contradictor, the difference between not being recognized during her lifetime and then now known as one of the greatest poets ever, although it's the best choice. For 17, dogs use their excellent sense of smell, bats rely on their incredible ears, so in the same way. These two different animals use two different senses to navigate the world. 18, none of these transitions really make sense. D is the best choice. For 19, we're looking at first, then, finally, sequence of events, C. 20, you were told in advance that a gift would be arriving, and you're surprised. So there's a contradiction there. A, no change, nevertheless, was the best choice. Next up, dangling modifiers and how to fix them. So a modifier at the beginning of a sentence with a comma right after has to describe the very first noun in the sentence. So the problem here is that you're literally saying that the rifle is hunting for deer, which is not true. We need Julian to be the noun right after the comma, so that way this modifier is describing Julian. Or if you said, having finished the SAT, the rest of life was easy, well, who finished the SAT? The noun was missing, so the modifier is dangling over there all by itself because it has nothing to describe. If you said, having had no water for 5 days, the steak and cheese sandwich, blah, 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 you're literally saying that the steak and cheese sandwich hasn't had any water for 5 days. You want to make sure that you have a pronoun like we or a noun that's possible for this modifier. There are multiple pathways to fix dangling modifiers. If you start off with a sentence like, after catching a cold, my lung surgery was the perfect cure, well, the lung surgery didn't catch a cold, but we could turn this into a prepositional phrase modifying I, or we could turn this into a dependent clause. Both of those would work. So if you say overcooked and overseasoned, Gordon Ramsay swore at the cook and dumped the fish into the garbage, well, Gordon Ramsay is not overcooked and overseasoned. So that's why this is a dangling modifier. The fish should be where Gordon Ramsay is. Dressed in a cute outfit and filled with cotton, the teddy bear, not Tiffany. Tiffany is probably not filled with cotton. With 13, this isn't quite a dangling modifier, but this is still a misplaced modifier. This phrase, wearing a cloak and top hat, is describing the magician. But where it's at in the sentence, it's as if it's describing the audience members, as if the magician only dazzled and surprised the audience members that were wearing a cloak and top hat. We should move that so that it's right after magician, next to the noun that it modifies. Another example of misplaced modifiers. Giggling should describe the very next noun, which is not gumballs. It's describing the toddler. And delighted should also describe the very next noun, which is not gumballs. It was toddler. Multiple choice questions like number 6. The first step should be looking at this modifier, astounded. And then we should look at the very first noun in each of the choices. We can ask ourselves, who or what was astounded? Was the ship astounded, the inspection, the divers, or the encounter? And you don't need to read any further than that. The choice is just C. Finally, parallel structure is the repetition of a particular grammatical construction within a sentence or paragraph. It is used to indicate that multiple ideas have equal levels of importance. So in a given list of three or more items, each item should appear in the same format. Noun, noun, and noun, gerund, gerund, and gerund, or verb, verb, and verb. And additionally, each item must have the same tense. So changes in wind circulation, runoff from sewage, and accumulation of chemical fertilizers would be parallel to each other. All three are nouns. None of the other choices accomplish that because the third word, accumulate, they accumulate, accumulating, are all different. Example 2 is about putting some gerunds together. Trapping, lassoing, and mimicking. They all end in ing. They're parallel. Example 3 is about verbs. Carry, confirm, verify. Notice the tense has to match. So if you choose a future tense verb like will verify, it's wrong. So sometimes we're just looking at two items joined by a conjunction, most often one of the fanboys, instead of a list, that is. And we might see to use and blank. Change would be the best choice. More parallel structure examples. Wolves, lions, sharks. Notice we don't want to add extra words like as or they act like, or even acting like. Here we see changing, rearranging. Both are joined with the conjunction and. Notice we have things like sugar, milk, coffee, meat, and canned goods. Those are all nouns, so we should keep the same format as the others. Watch out for correlative conjunctions like not only, but also. So that would tell us it can't be A or B. And then we're going to match helped to created. We don't want the to there. That's why D was the best choice. Number 9, we see complete, pass, and obtain. Not obtaining, and we don't need extra helping verbs or pronouns. For 10, pay close attention to the structure of the items in a list. We need the article in front of the noun, and then we have is something. So the best choice here, D. The ability to recognize, preserve, and create parallelism for multiple sentences will also be tested. In example 1, an actor stands as an audience hangs, in the same way that a singer performs as listeners fall, in the same way that dancers glide as spectators watch. Another example, Martha Graham was praised not only for the brilliance of her technique, but also in the vividness and intensity of her movements. For these to be parallel, we would have to have one of two things, either for something and for something else, or we can omit the preposition in the second item, which means that D would be the best choice. Another example of a similar phenomenon. We could say were dazzled and were amazed, which is not one of the choices here, or we can omit the helping verb for the second verb. The repetition of the verb were is optional in the same way that the preposition was optional in the previous. So here's a correct version. I like to fly planes, to ride trains, and to drive automobiles. They're all the infinitives, followed by a noun. But it's also correct to leave out the to's because they're implied to carry over to all three items in the list. So this to is implied to connect to all of the verbs. We don't have to write it 3 times, just once is good enough. If you're going to use it though, you must be consistent. It would be incorrect to say to fly, to drive, but not to have to ride.